the herbiage and so on. So green, because that's the colour that's most restful to our eyes. And imagine how awful it would have been if it had been orange or purple. It would have been very clashing. I didn't know anything then about chlorophyll or photosynthesis or natural selection or anything of the sort. All of that was completely unknown to me, but I knew right away that that was complete nonsense, that she'd got it exactly the wrong way round, that the eyes would have adapted to the vegetation and not the other way round. And I was amazed that no one else in my group could see that the teacher was talking rubbish. But if she hadn't been the scripture teacher, she might possibly have got a bit more opposition. But because she was, people thought, well, she can't be wrong. So it was also a lesson to me in how even very smart people will believe very stupid things if they think there's a religious reason to do so.
But in the book, you really refer constantly to religion and the Bible. And, of course, you don't subscribe to religious beliefs, but I'm wondering what function religion and religious texts serve for you as a thinker and a writer.
Well, what I do a lot of the time, it's maybe not the best known part of my work, but I write quite a lot of literary essays and articles and reviews and considerations of mainly English literature. And if you want to do that, you have to have some sense of the cadences and the rhythms of the Bible. I was actually at a literary festival in England a couple of weeks ago and was asked just to name a summer reading book, and I said, well, I thought the book of Job. One of the most beautiful books in the Bible. It has the most extraordinary language in it.
That must have shocked your audience that you would recommend a book from the Bible.
Well, but it didn't shock them so much. I went on to say, I also think it's one of the stupidest books in the Bible, because here you have God deciding to waste his omnipotence on torturing some poor farmer to see if he can make him crack or not, as a demonstration of his power. I mean, it really is. It's a horrible book as well, but it's just as well it's so well written.
My guest today is Christopher Hitchens, author of the controversial bestseller God Is Not Great, and most recently his own memoir, Hitch 22. We'll be back after a short break. This is Interfaith Voices, and I'm Maureen Fiedler. Today we're talking to the militant atheist, Christopher Hitchens, about his life's journey, recorded in a new memoir called Hitch 22. Well, now, one of the most significant themes in Hitch 22 is that the personal is political and vice versa. And you transition frequently between your personal interactions and the world stage, especially when you describe the 1960s and the Cultural Revolution. Has the political been consistently personal for you? And did this political reality in any way contribute to your atheism?
Well, just to, in reverse order then, to the last question, no, it has nothing to do with that.
Okay.
That I'm aware of. I'll think about it, I promise, but nothing occurs right away. When I was a young sort of Marxist factionalist in the late 1960s, the personal was political only in the sense that you were expected to give the best of your effort and your life to the cause, and that anything else was self-indulgent.
When you say that these causes you were involved in said you ought to give your all for the cause, doesn't that sound a bit like a religious calling to you?
Well, of course it does, yes. I mean, that is it's an observable fact, I think, about revolutionary movements, that they have a messianic quality to them. Often in two senses. First, in the feeling of complete sacrifice and commitment, and second, in having the illusion of being able to create a utopia. And what the point of this book is, of Hitch 22, is to say that that's the delusion, the idea that you can bring about an ultimate paradise.
Now, it's also clear from your book that there are many friends who are incredibly important to you.
Yes.
For example, one was the noted author and cultural critic Edward Said.
Yes.
And you wrote a piece with him on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. From your perspective today, as you look at that, what role does religion play in that conflict?
Well, putting it briefly, I mean, if the Arab-Israeli or Israeli-Palestinian dispute was what I think it is, which is a conflict of rights over a certain portion of land where there's room for two peoples. It would or could have been solved by now, by the rough expedient of half each, some form of partition or power sharing. They both have quite good claims to the whole of the land, but if they press their claim to the whole of the land, then everyone who isn't Palestinian or Jewish has to move out or be killed. The only people who insist on the only unworkable solution are the religious, who each say that actually there's nothing to talk about. God gave us this land and no one else does have any rights here. So that the two-state solution, which is desired by the majority of Israeli and American Jews, by, I think, a majority of Palestinians, by the United Nations, by the European Union, by everybody who's ever looked into it, we cannot win, we cannot get what we want, what would be a solution, because there's a religious veto on it. And the imams and the rabbis, and with a lot of help, by the way, from some Christian fanatics in the United States on the Jewish side, and from liberation theology morons on the Palestinian side, are making it absolutely impossible to have a sensible discussion even. They will get what they want, which is a devastating, annihilating war. They like that idea because they love the idea of the end of the world and they think it might bring on the Messiah. This is why I don't have a very lenient attitude towards religion. It wants to kill me and it doesn't arouse compassion in me when it makes this so plain.
Speaking of religion wanting to kill somebody, you also befriended Salman Rushdie.
Yes.
Who was famously a fatwa victim, a fatwa from the Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran, who threatened his life because he published the Satanic Verses, which many Muslims believe was an irreverent portrayal of the Prophet Muhammad. Talk about your friendship with Salman Rushdie.
Well, I have a chapter, a long one, about him and knowing him before, during, and after the Ayatollah Khomeini offered money in his own name as the theocratic head of a foreign state for the murder of a novelist who wasn't even an Iranian, didn't live in Iran, lived in London. That was in 1989 on Valentine's Day. I'll never forget the day. And I thought that day, well, that's it. That's a real confrontation between everything I like and everything I don't like. And I was a bit depressed by how many liberals and others wanted to run away from the confrontation and say, well, it's not really about that. If only Salman had written a book that was more respectful of religion, we wouldn't have all this trouble. And of course, a number of religious figures made that argument as well, including the Vatican and the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Sephardic Chief Rabbi of Israel. They all said the problem was really, you say irreverence, that's a mild way of putting it, blasphemy. As it happens, almost all free speech cases in history, starting from Socrates, have been about blasphemy, about the right to challenge the gods. And this is the one for our time. And I think there's only one corner to be in, and I hope, a persuasive description of him and the corner, and try and get other people to join us there.
Now, with all due respect, Christopher, and you acknowledge this in the book, a lot of people really don't like you. Your ideas upset a lot of people. Why do you think that is?
Well, I would like it to be that they don't like my opinions, but I think I'd be very lucky to get away with holding it at just that. I think the people who find me insufferable.
You don't think it's because your views just touch one of the most sensitive nerves, if you will, by going after religion?
No, on that question, you'd be surprised. I really think you might be if you saw my mailbag or my email. If you saw the number of places, religious institutions, mainly Christian, but quite often Jewish, who have invited me to come to their colleges and their campuses and their schools and their institutes to debate this. It's been really very heartening. I get a bit of hate mail from out-of-control believers of various kinds, but not much. And I must add, it speaks very well of the faithful. They've been very courteous and hospitable to me. And also speaks well of the United States.
And is it ever difficult for you to confront people who really are terribly upset by what you say or who you are?
No. I like it. And I learn from it too. You see, one doesn't go into this business simply to score a point against the other side. I mean, there is that. You hope that by doing it, you clarify and improve your own arguments. And in the case of one or two of the faithful with whom I've debated, I've found that by the end of the evening, both of our positions have sort of polished up a little bit. and we've moved it to a higher level. That's what you aim for.
And finally, you are an anti-theist, and we are a show about religion. We strive to cover all faith traditions and viewpoints. And I'm wondering why you agreed to do this interview, and if you have any critique of a show like ours.
Well, I can't offer a critique of your show, but I can say that I think it was very generous of you to invite me on it.
We think of people of your perspective as part of the perspectives that we try to include in this show.
Well, I think that speaks well, as I said before, both of you and of the United States of America.
Christopher Hitchens is the author of Hitch 22, a memoir.